Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Please consider subscribing and check out our Patreon for more. Enjoy the video. Ring the bell again? I can hear her vacuuming, so she must be in there, Julie said. Yeah, I hear it too. She's not going to hear the bell. Wait a minute, I know where she keeps her spare key. It should be right over here. Got it. Boy, is she in for a big surprise. The door opened, and the girls came in. As soon as they walked in, they stopped when they saw a figure with a vacuum who was wearing curlers and a dress from the 1950s. Sue yelled over the noise of the vacuum, "What's with the costume, Kara?" When Mark turned around, he was startled to see two girls looking at him. Their eyes grew very big. Sue said, "You're not Kara. Where is Kara? Who are you?" Kara ran up the stairs and into her apartment at that moment. She looked at Mark, who was standing there scared, and then she looked at Sue and Julie. They looked confused at first, but then they started to smile as they waited for an explanation. They looked closely at the figure in curlers, covered their mouths, fell over, and started laughing. Sue pointed at Mark and said, "Oh my God, it's Mark." Mark's worst fear was about to come true. Sue was the last person he would want to see him dressed up. She had always looked at him with a face that showed she was suspicious. He had heard her call him girly more than once behind his back. Now he was standing in front of her wearing a dress, a full face of makeup, and curlers in his hair. Sue said sarcastically, "So you are a little princess after all. I knew it. Sue, there's no need to make fun of Mark. I talked him into it, so don't laugh at him," Kara yelled, running from the driveway into the house. Sue asked, "And I bet you put up a real fight, huh, Mark?" Mark just turned his head down and blushed. Julie was shocked. "God, he looks so pretty. I didn't even know he wasn't a girl," she said. "Yeah, I have to admit you fooled me. If Kara hadn't told me, I wouldn't have known either," Sue laughed. She looked at him. She felt terrible. She was to blame for him being in trouble. Sue quickly calmed down and changed how she talked. She gave Kara a wink. Kara seemed to notice Sue, as if to say that she would go along with the plan. "Well, Kara, do we get to see the final look? Or are you going to leave those curlers in forever? I'm sure Mark is sick of having them in by now." Mark looked up at Kara. "Well, I guess we have to do that at least," she said. "Why don't you girls sit down and I'll finish Mark's hair?" They did. Missy? How about a glass of wine while we wait?" Julie asked Mark with a bold look in his eyes. Julie gave a wink to Kara and Sue to let them know she heard them, and Mark got a bottle of white wine and poured each of them a glass. Sue laughed out loud and winked again at Kara as she said, "You're going to be such a good housewife someday." Julie laughed. As Mark and Kara walked away, the two girls laughed. As Mark and Kara left the room, "I'm so sorry, Mark. Really, I am. I had no idea something like this would happen." "What do you think she'll do?" Mark asked in a scared voice, referring to Sue. "Well, it's hard to say, but let's try to keep her busy for now. She'll come around." "What about Julie?" asked Mark. "I don't know. I don't know her that well. We'll just have to see what happens. For now, let's just finish your hair." Kara then carefully took out each curler and put it back in the big plastic bin. As each curler was taken off, the curls sprung to life. Kara was shocked by how many curls were on Mark's head. It was exactly what she wanted. His big, soft curls fell in layers past his small shoulders. She just had to give the curls a little shake and spray them with a little hairspray to keep them in place. Kara finished her look by putting on a gold necklace and hoops to go with the new hairstyle. Kara led Mark back into the living room, where Sue and Julie were waiting for him. She told him to turn all the way around so the girls could see how his hair looked from every angle. My, don't we look nice? Mark, do you feel as nice as you look?" "Oh, wait, you don't call him Mark, do you, Kara?" Sue asked. "Well, Marcy, I was thinking about the name," said Kara. "Is it Marcy?" "Yes, I kind of like that. It sounds very feminine and even a little French." Mark stood there with his eyes wide and looked at Sue in shock. The shame kept happening over and over again, but it was worse this time. Instead of being embarrassed in front of high school girls, he was going to be locked in dresses and made to serve 3 different women. Look, I'll tell you what, Kara, I know you don't want this to get out, so let's just say that as long as Marcy is in your care, you'll make her available once in a while, like when I have a party or something. I hate getting ready for them, and I hate cleaning up after them, Sue said as Kara looked at Mark. Mark looked away, shook his head to show he understood, and turned red. Yeah, I guess something like that would work for me too, but I don't really do parties. Maybe Marcy could just come over and go to some of the neighbors' parties with me. They all laughed after a long pause. Mark, who was still standing, didn't understand what was going on. Was all of this a joke? A big put-on? They laughed even more. Mark was nearly crying. Oh no, we've upset the little girl, Sue said. Kara looked at Mark and saw that he was upset. Mark looks at Kara and asks, "Is this all a joke?" Kara says, well, sort of, but not really. What? Mark asks, totally confused. She means that after Julie and I saw you with your curlers, we were putting you on for a while, but now I think we all like the idea of having a good girl like you. Mark was shocked. I kind of like the idea of having a part-time maid. Me too, Julie said with a smile. If you want your secret to stay a secret, of course, Sue said, looking at Kara. Kara looked at Mark and said sweetly, but I'm not sure I want to share you just yet. Mark's mind was going crazy. He had no idea what to believe or think. Mark pouted. You all act like you know everything about me, but I don't even know myself yet. And here you all are, planning my future as some kind of servant. Sue replied sharply, You don't think of yourself as a submissive girl, is that it? Mark replied, Well, no, and I don't think you should just assume that either. Sue said in a loud, authoritative voice, Oh, really? Let's just put that theory of yours to the test. Sue said, I bet we can come to a conclusion with just 10 questions, as long as you answer them honestly. Are you up for it? Mark said, Sure, with full confidence. And if I show you wrong, you'll agree to do what we want, right? Sue asked him in a firm voice. Mark thought for a moment and started to feel a little uneasy. Then she said, Sure, I promise. With a big smile, Sue said, All right, here's the first question. Would you rather watch Monday Night Football or wash, condition, and do a facial on yourself? Mark grimaced. He thought Sue was playing a trick on him because she knew he didn't like sports. Well, I guess I'd wash and condition my hair and give myself a facial, he said. Mark answered reluctantly, but that doesn't prove anything. And the girls laughed. Question number 2. Can you think of more sports teams or beauty products? Mark grimaced again. Another question about sports. This wasn't fair. Beauty products, but no more sports questions, Mark demanded. Okay then, here's the third question. Do you go to beauty supply stores or auto parts stores more often? The girls laughed when Mark sighed and nervously said, Beauty supply stores. Question number 4. Which would you rather do on a Saturday afternoon? Change the oil in your car or do your ironing? Mark started to slouch in his chair. I need to catch up on my ironing, he said meekly as the girls stared at him. Question number 5. Would you rather go fishing or shopping at the mall? Asked Mark. He was starting to feel nervous, so he answered, Shopping. The girls were very happy with how the questions had turned out so far. 5 more to go, Julie said with a smile. Sue went on. Question number 6. Would it be easier for you to explain how to use a power drill or a curling iron? Mark's face started to get red. All of the answers were obvious. A curling iron, he said glumly as the girls waited for the next question. Question number 7. Which would you say you're better at? Fixing a leaky drain under the kitchen sink or making dinner? Mark could hardly move. He couldn't see any way out. Getting dinner ready, he said with his head down. Question number 8. When you first see a woman, do you notice how her hair and makeup look or how her body looks? This question shocked Mark. That was right. First, he'd notice her hair and makeup. He did nothing but sit there and look helpless. Sue asked, Well, what is your answer? Her hair and makeup, Mark said as the girls covered their mouths to keep from laughing. Sue kept going for the kill. Question number 9. When you see a woman in a pretty dress, do you see the whole woman or do you focus on the pretty dress? The girls leaned forward to hear Mark's answer. Mark moved around in his chair, crossed his legs, and then fixed his skirt nervously, just like a girl. Then he crossed his arms, turned his head, and used one hand to cover his mouth. He looked like a girl who was going to cry. He felt terrible. He knew that if he told the truth, he would lose. He said, "The pretty dress." Sue asked, "What was that again?" Mark replied more loudly, "The pretty dress." The girls were blown away. Mark listened carefully because he was afraid of the last question. Sue leaned forward. "Okay, last question. You've been out of work for 6 months and are desperate to get a job. You interview at a large company and they tell you there are only 2 jobs available. One is a coat and tie executive trainee position in the sales department. The department is mostly filled with older men, close to retirement age, so a good salary and fast advancement could be expected. The other job is a traditional secretary position." Mark's eyes got very big in shock. He didn't think it was true. He knew right away which job he would take. The first job's description should have been appealing, but it wasn't. The second job shouldn't work, but it did. He thought he was a fool for letting someone question him. He had to tell the truth now. Mark answered with his head down. "I'd like to be the secretary." The girls sat there in shock. Sue said in a way that echoed Mark's answer, "So you'd rather be one of the pretty secretaries than one of the up-and-coming executives?" Mark said, "I guess so." He knew there was no point in arguing. Sue took Mark's hand and led him to a full-length mirror. She then asked, "So what do we learn from this? Do we see a young man who is ready to take on the world? Or do we see a pretty little girl who is ready to serve?" Mark stood there in shame. He looked in the mirror and saw himself as a pretty girl with long curly hair, a dress, and high heels. He didn't want to answer, but he didn't have much choice. He said, "A pretty little submissive who is ready to submit and serve." Sue put her arms around Mark and said, "I rest my case." Sue said, "I think we all knew you were just a pretty little girl. We just had to help you admit it." Mark liked how Sue went from being mean and teasing to being nice and warm. Kara joined them at the mirror and asked, "Are you ready to be trained and learn how to be a good housewife?" she asked. Mark said, "Yes, I'm ready to be taught how to be a proper housewife." The girls all clapped their hands in agreement. "Is there still hope for Sue and me, Marcy?" Julie asked warmly. Mark thought for a moment, grinned, and said, "It would be a pleasure someday, I promise." "Oh no, I think I just heard a promise being broken." Kara laughed, grabbed Mark by the shoulders, and gave him a hug. As she hugged him, Mark raised a high-heeled leg behind him as a woman should. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Patreon for a lot more content and early access to YouTube videos.